How much do homes cost in New York City? We'll demystify this topic in the following video. I'm Nick at Houseit. Visit our website, houseit.com, to learn how to save money if you are looking to buy here in New York City. So let's get started. So how much do homes cost here in New York City? Well, this is a very expansive topic, but if we're looking at the headline numbers or the top line numbers, the median home price in New York City is anywhere between $700,000 and $800,000. But that number or that range itself doesn't really provide that much utility because the actual price and prevalent price per square foot of a property in New York City varies widely depending on several factors, including, for starters, what borough it's in: Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, or Staten Island. Not only what borough it's in, but what neighborhood is it in. If you're downtown in Manhattan, are you in the financial district or are you in the West Village? Massive differences in terms of the price per square foot and the cost of a home in the neighborhoods within, of course, each of the boroughs here in New York City. And then, of course, we have the topic of the property type. So here in New York, of course, you have apartments, just like everywhere else, but we have condos and we have co-ops. Different forms of ownership with different positive and negative attributes. And so, that really will impact the valuation. Co-ops are anywhere from 10 to 40% cheaper than condos in the same area. You buy the exact same apartment, if it says condo versus co-op, the pricing differential could be massive. And then, of course, you have townhouses, you have brownstones throughout New York City and all of the boroughs, essentially. And you also have the occasional home, single or multifamily freestanding home. All of these different property types have different valuations and different prevailing pricing characteristics. One question that we are frequently asked is, what's the cheapest apartment in Manhattan? And that's a really good question. And, the answer is a bit convoluted because, technically you can get an apartment in quote unquote Manhattan for like $200,000. But an apartment in this price point is either going to be extremely far up in Manhattan, in a neighborhood, for example, like Hamilton Heights, or the property more likely has some other factor that's contributing to that diminished pricing. It could be an HDFC apartment. This type of apartment, which we'll discuss in another video, has income restrictions for the purchaser, so it constricts the number of people who qualify for the property. So there's plenty of HDFC apartments, HDFC co-ops in the city, in Manhattan, that you can find for around $200K starting, but you might not qualify depending on your income. There are also inexpensive apartments in more proximate neighborhoods towards central Manhattan, which are in that $200K range, but the building might be on a land lease. Now, land lease buildings are slightly more nuanced because of the additional complexity of the fact that the building does not actually own the land on which it's constructed. So it just creates an additional nuance and topic or a learning curve for prospective purchasers, and it does impact the valuation in many cases. So if we're cutting out all of the special circumstances that we've talked about, like land lease buildings, HDFC co-ops, and we cut out really ridiculously north neighborhoods in Manhattan that most people don't actually associate with Manhattan, we get back to the question at hand, which is how much does it cost for an apartment starting in Manhattan? And the answer to that is roughly $275,000. That's the level where you'll start to see pretty good supply and pretty good amount of inventory and options within central proximate neighborhoods such as the Upper East Side here in Manhattan. Another commonly asked question is, how much does a property cost, a one-bedroom apartment, a condo, in somewhere like downtown Manhattan? And this is a really interesting topic because it speaks to the fact that each particular neighborhood in New York City has such a nuanced distinction with respect to the pricing. So if we're looking at, say, something in like NoHo or Nolita or Soho and it's a new condo, the price per square foot there could potentially be starting minimum at $2,000 a square foot, and in most cases closer to $2,500 or $3,000 a square foot. But if we go to a neighborhood that has greater supply, and certainly in the case of financial district, the pricing is completely different. You could start to find condos around $1,500 a square foot or potentially less. So think about the fact that we're talking about neighborhoods that are a short walking distance apart, financial district, say in Nolita, and the difference in the pricing is tremendous there. So we would say, though, in general, if you want to buy an apartment, a condo, minimum one-bedroom condo in downtown, excluding the financial district, which is a bit cheaper, and it's a new development, expect to pay at least $1.5 million for a one-bedroom. And keep in mind as well that with new developments, you have slightly higher buyer closing costs, which we do discuss in detail the reasons for that in another video. How much is a two-bedroom apartment in Brownstone, Brooklyn? Now, this is another very commonly asked question from clients who reach out to HouseIt because of the fact that Brooklyn generally provides better relative value in terms of spacing. So, for anyone in a household with more than two individuals, spacing is a real consideration. So obviously Manhattan, we talked about pricing downtown. If you need multiple bedrooms, it's going to be tough for the average person to shell out $2,000, $3,000 a square foot. So as a result, people go to Brownstone, Brooklyn. Brownstone, Brooklyn, we would consider to be, neighborhoods that are rather proximate to Manhattan, Park Slope, for example, Clinton Hill, and adjacent areas. And in our experience, the sort of two-bedroom kind of starter type larger apartment in these areas comes in at around $650K and above, which offers tremendous relative value if we compare it to most of Manhattan. So as a result, if you are looking to buy, a two-bedroom plus quasi-starter type apartment in Brownstone, Brooklyn, expect there to be a lot of competition. You've got a lot of buyers out there looking for this combination of spacing, relative value, location, and such. So very common for these types of properties, say in like Clinton Hill or Park Slope, to end up in a bidding war. And most commonly in New York, we call it a best and final process, where many people submit their bid, and then the seller basically picks the best one and moves forward. Another question we get is, how much does a townhouse cost in New York City? Now, this is a very, very broad question because there's essentially no limit to the cost of a potential townhouse. Like, you can find a townhouse, a prime, gut renovated, massive double width townhouse in New York City, tens of millions of dollars, maybe $50 million or more. There's literally no upper limit. But for the typical home buyer, they want to probably spend starting around $2 million, let's say up to $2 to $5 million is like your more common type of buyer for brownstones. And the good news is that in Brooklyn, you can find plenty of townhouses between $2 and $4 million. Certainly in Brownstone, Brooklyn, Park Slope, and those types of areas, it's going to be much closer to that 4, and in many cases way higher if you're looking at like a gut renovated or a substantially sized townhouse. But if your budget is lower, maybe you can find something that's unrenovated in Brownstone, Brooklyn. Or if you go a bit further out, Bed-Stuy, Bushwick, you can find loads of substantial townhouses around that price point, which may very well be even gut renovated. And you can find townhouses as you go further out in Bushwick, Bed-Stuy, so on and so forth, near $1 million and potentially less. So the answer to the question is your typical brownstone in Brooklyn is going to cost $2 to $4, $5-ish million, but you absolutely can find something for less than 2. And of course in Manhattan, the sky's the limit there. But expect to pay, in downtown, probably no less than, high single digits in terms of millions, and in most cases, $10 million or more. So we hope you found this video to be helpful. If you are looking to buy in New York City, we can save you money. Learn how at houseit.com. I'm Nick at HouseIt. We appreciate your time today, and we'll see you on the next video.